That's great.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Well, thanks so much for joining me here at Pastors Positive Mental Health Institute. Kirk, as always, with another beautifully bald-headed man. I mean,
Yes.
not everyone can pull it off. I'm just going to say that.
It's
I
a
think,
hairstyle.
yeah. I think you and I were kind of gifted with the necessity to go to this way, so
You
didn't
got
have a
it.
choice. But you make up for it in glorious beard. I know Christmas is coming around, and you have a wonderful gig for many years now, where you get to play Santa for many different circumstances, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But if you like the content here, please like, share, and subscribe, whatever format you're watching or listening this in. I would greatly appreciate it. But let's just dive right in. This is John Voelz. Now, John, I'm trying to think, what year did you graduate high school at Nevada Union?
1986. You could have just
So
asked me my
you were
age.
with my brother then.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay, I couldn't
graduated with
remember
your
if you were
brother.
the same year or a year after him. I couldn't remember. So I saw John across the choir auditorium as we sang together. And John was a guy who everybody wanted to be. No, I don't know about that, but John was the guy who had the guitar in his hands and was playing all the time. And I'm excited to talk to you for all of you to know what John's doing now because he's still playing a lot of music. He was actually you don't know this, but when you're in Folsom, we went to one of the worship nights there, and it radically impacted our oldest son. And so I thank you for that, and how you were used for that. So let's just dive in, and let me just ask this question. I ask most of my guests this first. What led you to be in ministry?
Yeah. Well, I mean, ministry, it depends on how you define ministry, right? In professional church ministry, which I think is the question that you are really getting to the root of. I was in bands. We were in Christian bands, and playing festivals and fairgrounds and all of those wonderful things when we were young. And I always had people that I trusted, people that were editors in my life, people that I had invited into my life to speak into me, would often ask me, have you ever considered going into full-time church ministry? And I think after a while, after hearing that so many times, I really started to ponder it. And I remember specifically sitting in church on a Sunday. My wife was home with the kids. We had 2 children at that time. Now we have 3. She was home with the kids because they were sick. And I was there by myself, and the pastor was speaking that day on going through seasons of complacency. And as I thought through what he was talking about, and kept asking myself the question, am I complacent? Do I feel this tug to do something and maybe it's just too hard, or I don't know how to get from A to B? I started thinking it through, and I'm not going to say God spoke to me audibly, but I was convicted that day that that's probably what I should be doing for the next season. And I knew I was probably going to have to go back to school and finish some education. And I had been, somebody had given me an old Multnomah Bible College and Seminary, like a catalog. That's the word I'm looking for. Ding, ding, ding. And it was at home. And I thought, you know what? My wife is going to hate this idea. She's not going to want to pick up and leave and start a new life. And, we're just trying to get on top of things right now, pay the bills. We need stability. And I had been working for my dad, who's a painting contractor at that time. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go home and I'm going to tell her I think that maybe we should go to Portland, Oregon, and I should go back to school. And I walk in the door, and she meets me, and I said, hey, I have something I need to talk about. And Tawny said, I have something too. I said, okay, you go first. And she said, I finally got the kids down for a nap. I was laying in the bath and I decided to pick up this Multnomah Bible College catalog that you had laying around. And I think maybe God wants you to go back to school. So, so it was pretty insane. We had no money. I called my in-laws that day. I asked to borrow money. I asked to borrow their car. I had an aunt who lived in Portland, Oregon, who I hadn't seen for years. I called her and asked her if we could stay there. I had a substandard GPA because I had dropped out of college when the kids were young to work, and all of my grades went down as withdraw, fail. And so I had to write a letter to Multnomah. I mean, it was a process, but fast forward, it was a wonderful experience. And I ended up carrying a good GPA from that point on. But that was our experience in Portland, and that was kind of my entry into the pastoral world.
Wow. So, I mean, obviously, ministry as believers is wherever you are. Me in my journey to becoming a Lutheran pastor is is interesting. But the whole thing is that the doctrine of vocation, wherever you are, God has placed you to minister and to serve and to be an ambassador for Christ and to love people where you're at. And so, but we have these moments and these seasons, like you're saying, and what I love about that is there were people that you trusted that spoke into your life so that you could hear from the Holy Spirit in that moment, because it wasn't just some new idea that you would reject right away. It was something that said, I wonder. And then I love that story. I was getting so excited. Hey, there was this catalog and I picked it up and I'm like, well, yeah, oh, crazy. And why did you even keep the catalog? We can go through that, but we don't need to, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about your journey then in pastoral ministry. Obviously, you went to Multnomah, and then kind of talk about the pastor, the churches you've served, kind of what you did, and then we'll just see where that takes us.
Yeah. I'll just give you the overview. It was, right away when I was in school, I started working in churches part-time. And mostly at that point, I was doing music. I was a music pastor. And, but slowly but surely, I started really getting interested in public speaking and public address. So then I got to start trying that on in those churches part-time. They would ask me to speak occasionally. And then, eventually ended up on elder boards and speaking teams and finding that I was doing music and speaking a lot. I was doing both of those. And I stayed in the music pastor role for a long time and have always had my hand in music. But we actually spent some time in Michigan. I was at a church in California for quite a few years, and I felt like I needed to spread my wings. I felt like I had ideas that I was not going to be able to implement in the church I was at. Not good, bad, right, or wrong. They weren't doing things wrong. I just had an idea of how things could be done differently. And I knew I was cut from a different cloth. So I pursued this thing in Jackson, Michigan, and I actually got hired to do music over there and to speak part-time, and very quickly ended up becoming one of 3 senior pastors. We put together a team leadership model where we all had different roles. So we all led exactly the same. Nobody had veto power over the other one. And I would do music and speak. And so working as a senior pastor for 11 years was also a wonderful thing. And then after being there for 11 years, the church that I had left asked me to come back and do some of the things that I was doing in Michigan. And I won't tell that story. I will say it was a train wreck. It just didn't work out, and sometimes that happens. So, you know, that has all of its own hurts and stories. But I always, you know, people say things happen for a reason. I don't believe that, to be quite honest. I think we'd be hard pressed to look through scripture and just our life experience and say everything happens for a reason. If I am late to work and find out there was an auto accident, had I been on time, and somebody says, well, everybody, you know, everything happens for a reason. I go, really? What about that poor schmuck that got into the accident?
Yeah.
You know? But I do believe God gives us perspective. On the other side of that church experience now, I do believe that I've gained perspective. And I think the biggest thing for me is that after that church experience, I went into the business world. We opened up a restaurant in the city where I was pastoring. We happened to open it up 6 days before COVID, and I could tell you stories all day long about that. But we lost everything in the process of that, and I was still pastoring. You know, when I was working with the city, when I was working with the historical district, where we were just being surrounded by people all of the time, being part of a community, it was some of the most profound pastoral work that I had ever done, ever been a part of. And so that's kind of our journey, you know, part-time churches, music and speaking, senior pastor, failed church experience. And then now here I am all of these years later.
Well, you know, you mentioned something that I think that is important, and we're not going to talk too much about that experience back in California, but you know, a lot of times we go to conferences, we read books, or we experience something and we go, oh, we need to do that here, or that needs to happen here. And sometimes context really does matter, and personality, collaboration matters too. And if you don't have those things there, just because it's working over here or in that city or that state doesn't mean it's going to work where you want it to do. I was working with another pastor before I moved out to Idaho, and he was wanting to kind of duplicate what they were doing in this other part of the state. And it was only about 40 minutes away. And I kept telling him, I said, you can't do that in this town. It won't work. Now you can have principles that'll work, but as far as everything that you're doing, I said, it's just a different group of people. I know it's close. And they finally launched a church plant a year ago now, and did it a little differently, and it's doing really well. But you know, it's one of those challenges we get into. Oh, we like what that's happening there. Like I used to go to, when I was serving a small church in music, I would go to big music conferences with Calvary Chapel, and they'd have these guys with, you know, 6,000, 10,000 people churches with all paid musicians, and you'd go, that's cool. And then you go, there's no way I could do that in my church of 60 people, right? Or 70 people. And so you just have to really, you know, manage that. And I appreciate your vulnerability and your genuineness. And again, like I told you, we don't want to rehash. So let's just for a moment think about your years in pastoral ministry. And can you kind of tell me, and obviously pastoral ministry, I'm going to talk about professional pastoral in a church setting for these questions. But how did you rely on church members over those years?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, community is a human privilege. So, I mean, I think God's design for people is always communal. The church has a special privilege in that it is the purveyor of community, of relationship. I mean, that's all we talk about, right? In church, we're always talking about it, whether it's small groups, if you're into that thing, or you know, community is happening everywhere. It's happening in personal space, in social space, in public space, in intimate space. Hopefully not in the church, but It's the church has a special privilege because it has a platform to talk about community all of the time. So we saw amazing things happen with community over the years. I think especially in the tough times, if I'm honest, especially when things go bad. If the church is working like it should, then you don't even have to ask for help. That's just what we do. People are there surrounding you, and not just doing the, hey, man, I'm going to pray for you, although that's important, but they're doing the real elbows deep kinds of ministry, kinds of community. I think the first time I ever saw community in the church working as it should, I was actually in high school with your brother. Well, with you. How old are you?
53.
Okay. So you were what, like a freshman?
Freshman, and you were a senior, yeah.
Yeah. So I was a sophomore. You weren't there at the school yet, and I started this prayer meeting in one of the classrooms, and that's how I met my wife, as a matter of fact. And let's be honest, it was also a dating service. I saved her a spot and suggested everyone should hold hands as we prayed, but. My dad was a painting contractor at that time, and we were just going through a real tough time. And I remember telling this group of people who were Jesus followers that my family was having a tough time. I got home from school that day, and my mom was sitting in a chair in the corner crying. And surrounding my mom on the floor from the front door to where my mom was were bags of groceries, all filling the living room. And my mom looked up and she said, "What did you tell these people?" And sorry, I get weepy. I lost my mom last year, so sorry.
It's all right.
I have always wanted to do church so that we are creating scenarios where every day someone is saying, "What in the world did you tell these people?" Where the church is just showing up and meeting needs and taking care of people. And so that's the first time I saw the church in action, and it really informed the way that I would try to create and craft ministry situations for the rest of my life. When we were in Michigan, I think one of the most unique things we did, going back to that, knowing your own zip code, knowing what the needs of your people are, knowing how your community operates, not one size fits all. Back in the day, we used to say just because there's a church in South Barrington, Illinois doing drama every Sunday does not mean that we need to be doing it. Number one, we have horrible actors. There's like, but one of the things we did in Michigan, to try to get in touch with our zip code, to try to get the pulse of what was happening, is we asked everybody, where are you currently volunteering? Where are you currently spending your time in the community? And we collected all of these stories. And we decided that we were going to take all of our funding and all of our effort, and we were going to support what was already happening in our community. But what we were going to do is we were going to try to leverage that with the funding and the people that is the privilege of the church to be able to make a huge impact in our community. And we went from a church that we inherited that had, a few decent ministries in the community to doing hundreds of things every single month that were making a huge impact in the community. And what ended up happening is the city, they gave us the keys to the city. They just loved every time Westwinds Community Church was going to have something to do with something in the city, because they knew it was going to be quality. They knew people were going to show up. They knew people were going to be helped, and they knew that we were in it for the long haul. We were playing the long game. It wasn't a Band-Aid we were looking to put on anything. We were looking to do special things that were going to grow into other special things. That 11-year period of time was by far the most impactful ministry I had ever been privileged to be a part of. To see people show up like that is a mind blower, and it was constant. It was almost exhausting, and not exhausting in the I'm trying to get this thing going and I can't find volunteers to help kind of exhausting, which is its own brand,
Right.
and should be a red flag probably at some point. Exhausting in the how are we going to keep up with all of the amazing things that are happening. So I am a huge fan of community, and I'm a huge fan of not only full-time church work kinds of community, but the kind of community that bleeds into your city so that the lines get blurred, so that pretty soon things are happening that blow minds and heads and brains. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because that can be exciting to a lot of pastors and church members when they hear things like that, but it can also be extremely scary and daunting. And what I mean by that is because to blur the lines means I actually have to get uncomfortable. It means I actually have to go to people that maybe I don't see it eye to eye with, or maybe I would never associate with. And I might just be accused of being like Jesus, who hung out with the gluttons and the drunkards, right? And so it's one of those things that I hear. But what I love about that, and it speaks to me, so thank you, is that that's kind of my passion, is trying to find where people already are serving or where their heart is, and how can I cheer for that as a pastor? How can I help? How can we get behind that? Because you've got someone already invested in it, right?
Yes.
And so rather than us as pastors coming in and saying, no, we need to do things this way, say, wait a second, this is, first of all, it's not my church as the pastor. This is the people's church. And I'm part of the people's, yes, but hey, how can we work together and do the thing? And you said something, and I don't even remember, our paths have crossed periodically over the years. And you just said something that I've held on to for years, and you talk about being in the long game. And so it's about creating relationship so that you can speak into the lives of someone and not looking for the quick, I don't think you said it this way, but I'm going to paraphrase, the quick conversion experience. It's like, no, let's create the long game so that they're disciples when you're done. Right.
Yeah.
And so you said that, I don't know, it must have been 12, 13 years ago. I don't know how we crossed paths. It was before you went to mission. No, it wasn't. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But when you said that, I'm like, oh, I've held on to that from a while ago because I really find that valuable. And so thank you for speaking that, not only then, but now too. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I think that's super important. Actually, that's part of what got me in trouble with churches where we didn't see eye to eye with ministry, because I think that fear and tradition are the killers of beautiful things in the church. And also you have to be able to be willing to give up a little control and set aside all of your constructs of how you believe that things should be done. A specific instance would be, and people, good men and women, line up on opposite sides of issues, and it should always be a conversation. But the rub, for me, I'll give you a specific example, was one church I work with had a big piece of property that was unused, or a big portion of the property that was unused. And one of the things that we started doing is utilizing that land for things that the city was involved with. So, community fairs and carnivals and those kinds of things. But ultimately, I wanted to turn it into a central park for the city, complete with pathways for moms to be able to push strollers and a playground for kids with special needs and a water fountain and a concert stage. And it was beautiful. And I remember one of the people in leadership saying, now explain to me, if we spent all of this money, how we then get people in the door to the church. And I thought, this is where it all goes bad for me. That is exactly the wrong question to ask. The questions we should be asking are, how do we create scenarios that get us face to face with people? How do we meet the people in our neighborhood? How do we find out what the needs are? And the only way you can do that, I mean, if you have that mindset, and you're not in control, and you're not the one who is, making conversions happen, so to speak, it all takes care of itself.
Yeah.
I mean, so I love being accused of the guy who's hanging out at the parties with the drunkards. That's beautiful. If the devil wants to throw a party in his backyard and he asks me to come do music, I'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's funny because it's one of those things that's it's hard for us. And I won't go down my road for a minute, but getting people to think kingdom minded and not my church minded, right? So how did that serve the purposes of the kingdom? How do we have those face to face? Because we care about people meeting Jesus Christ, more than whether they come to my church or not. Yeah. And it's hard because we get very narrow minded, and and you've been in those churches. I've been in those churches where it's about building the church, not the big C church. It's the little kingdom here, not the big kingdom. So what have you found to be maybe one of the most challenging aspects of the ministry over the years?
Well, there's a ton of challenging things. I think there is, and no matter what you do for a living. But the very thing I love about the church is the thing that's the most challenging for me, and that is community. It's people. It's communication. It's seeking to understand one another. And so in the machine that is sometimes professional ministry, everybody's got an idea of how things should operate, because, the church that you go to now is the church you will be from. So there is in any leadership situation, people coming together, they all have an idea of how things should go. And so I work fast, and I do new and different really, really well. What I don't do well is processing, talking in meeting after meeting after meeting, hand-holding, performing triage. And I mean, of course, when people are hurting, but I mean in like leadership situations where, what you said about what we should do really hurt my feelings because I believe this thing. That stuff is exhausting to me. But I also know that I need to, I pray that I can, that I'll have like a softness that I don't always have, because I do move so fast. And I've always believed that we pray in advance of opportunities. so that when opportunities present themselves, we take advantage of them immediately rather than being in a situation where something beautiful can happen and we find ourselves saying, well, let me pray about that. And then, we put together a silent prayer retreat, and then we invite all of our friends together to pray about it for a month. And then we talk to everybody we know to pray about it for another month. And then, no, I want to be praying continually. And I believe this is actually maybe scriptural. Be praying continually so that when opportunities present themselves or ideas present themselves, we say, why can't we do that? Who said we can't do that? We need to move immediately. So, with that said, what's difficult about ministry? It has been that mindset for me, sometimes working with people who don't think that way. And I'm not vilifying them.
Right.
Saying we're all shaped differently. And that's where sometimes it has gone awkward and awry for me. And then another thing that's difficult, and I don't mean difficult in the I'm going to go home and cry in my coffee kind of difficult, but difficult in that it's time consuming, is just vetting information, helping people see what's inside of my head, what's inside our heads as a leadership team. Oftentimes that just, it can be difficult. It's tiring because you want things to move faster. You want people to say, why don't they understand this?
Right.
How can we not understand this? And so, but it's still important. I think one of the riskiest things, we did quite a few risky things in Michigan, but one of the riskiest things we did for a few of the more conservative mindsets on our leadership team is when we asked for that large list of what people were already doing. One guy in our church community is a vintner. He makes wine.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a few wineries, and he said, as a Jesus follower, it was difficult for him in churches that he went to over the years because they didn't think he should be in the alcohol business. Well, we decided to embrace him, and I know this isn't for everybody, to embrace him and to make a charity wine and to sell that wine and to give that wine back to the community somehow. And that year when we made that Cabernet Sauvignon, it was a good selling wine, and we became the largest donor to the School of the Arts in our community. And so we leveraged what was his passion, because that's how God had shaped him. We leveraged his art because we believed that the winemaking is an art. Mm-hmm. We leveraged that art to be able to grow something. And the community that we gave the money to, a lot of those kids didn't have, they were coming home to homes without parents at home, and they went into this program. They didn't have the money to do the things that they wanted to do in the school. And that was a rare privilege. But it did take some vetting. It took some time to get people on our side. It took asking the questions beforehand. What are people going to say about this? And having a good answer for it. So we weren't just defensive, because that's things always go bad if you're just defensive with it. But if you have a good answer for it, you might find that some people don't like that answer, but as long as everybody has the official word of the White House and everybody is on the same page, then there might be some fallout and you might lose some people, but it might just be worth it.
So not being safe. So safe Christianity, I think, is not good. And I appreciate I think you're going to inspire some people who listen to this to go, you know what? Maybe we can think outside the box a little bit. In my context, we have no problem with wine, so that's great. That's wonderful. I think you can't just use the excuse that, well, Jesus was in the winemaking business, although he was. So, but no, but again, I think the heart of what you're saying is how do we, in unique and ways, meet the needs of the people in our community. And let's not make it fit in our box. Let's go, okay, let's think about it. And one of the challenges I think that you shared and I appreciate is that we are God's workmanship, right? Created to do works that He has prepared in advance that we would walk in them. So when you're praying and then you're presented with something, oh, this is probably a work that God has planned for me to walk in, which means it's going to be successful because it's the divine setup. But yet we do what you explained. Well, let's just meet, let's have committees, let's form a couple committees, let's pray a while. And 6 months later, you're like, oh, the opportunity's gone. And so I think that obviously we don't want to be reckless, but at the same time, what a joy it is to walk in the spontaneity of the Spirit when things present themselves and say, what do we need to pray about? And here it is. We've been praying about how can we serve. And now here's an opportunity. Why do we need to keep praying? God's answered the prayer. So let's move forward. So no, I appreciate that. So I'm going to switch these next two questions a little bit. What is your desire for the church as a whole? You've been in lots of different contexts and different roles in the church. And so if you were to look at the church locally and globally, what would you say, man, I really wish the church would be this?
Yeah. I wish a lot of things for her. But I think what I mostly wish for the church is that she would get over her bad self and take some risks. I think we need a church to take risks. So this might cause some controversy. I'll just say it. All right. During COVID, like I lost a business during COVID. I was doing, business in the community during COVID. And I was outside the church watching things happen. Now, this is where the controversy comes in. I'm not saying you should have thought a certain way about masks, or you should have thought a certain way about anything with COVID gathering together. But I do remember one thing that hurt deep during COVID for me. I was driving down the freeway in the city, well, the sister city where I was living and working, and there was a huge digital billboard that said, "Let us worship." That's what it said. Let us worship. Now, great, fantastic. I don't know the thought that went into that, but it hurt me because I went, I was saddened that we were taking time and money and space for that to be our message, which honestly was very, very selfish. Great, let us worship. Sure, I get it. You wanted to have your whole church together. Got it. Beautiful. But that's a conversation to be had, I think, within your own church community, within your own church leadership, where you decide what is best for us at this time. With the information that we have, how are we going to do the best? Mm-hmm. But to spend all that time and money to scream at the city, let us worship, made me sick to my stomach. And I thought, I don't want to be part of that. What if we had taken all of those resources and allocated them differently during COVID? What if that billboard said something like, "How can we help?" I'm sure there's a million things it could have said that would have been helpful, as opposed to aggressive and divisive. So I want the church to take risks, and I want her to listen to what's happening around her and not be so concerned what she can or cannot do, or what she is being, kept from doing by the powers that be. But ask different questions. Um, and I know that's going to sound political when I say it, but I don't know. I mean, I think Jesus was a bit political. I think he would ask different questions.
Well, no, and I agree, and not to get too sidetracked, but it was unfortunately revealing time in the church, and I don't think it revealed good things, and I think that I'll get on my little soapbox for a minute, but Christian nationalism is horrible. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, let's care more about the kingdom. God cares more about these people dying without Christ. And even in my little church, I spent a Sunday saying if 10 people would come to church, if you wore a mask, would you wear a mask? And I finally went down to if one would you love them enough to wear a mask? Because, Idaho can be a little bit rebellious.
Sure.
The area that you're at in I know can have that similar political bent. And it's like, wait a second, this is not a no one's telling you can't worship God.
Yeah.
But they are saying, can you love one another? Even if you don't agree with it, even if you don't understand it, even if you are reading one side of the narrative, can you still love a person, even if who is scared?
Yeah.
Who, can you love them enough? And unfortunately, a really great congregation. They're really safe, and they're like, okay, yeah, if there's one that would come back to church and we would wear a mask, we would do it.
Sure.
But really, that's the heart of the Lord, right? Can we serve one another? And that means I might give up my freedom to serve somebody else. Can you do that? You might get uncomfortable. And I'm telling people who want great revival, I said, to have the revival that I'm talking about, which is different than what most people. I mean, I want God's kingdom to grow. But to have that will mean that you as a Christian will become uncomfortable.
Hope so.
Well, but you've dealt with it. The mentality is, no, I just want things to go back to the way it is, and everyone agree with me, and to be God-fearing people. Well, no, I want people who are radically in love with Jesus and want to go to into the nether parts of the world to meet people where they're at. And it means we're going to get uncomfortable. If we truly want revival, we're going to get uncomfortable. We got to be okay with that, right? I mean, so anyway, okay.
Well, and what you're saying, it's not even speaking to opposite sides. It's not even, during that time, you could line up on either side of those issues politically. Mm-hmm. But I think we all would have done things differently if we said, what is our motivation? Love. Mm. If your motivation's love, there's no billboard going up in your city.
Right.
Like that, anyway.
Right.
That was not love motivated. Mm-hmm. And I'm not making a statement about what they believed about corporate worship. Right. I'm making a statement about the motivation.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's really fair. Awesome. So what has brought you joy the last couple of weeks?
Oh, gosh. Last couple of weeks. Well, one of the things that the thing that I'm doing right now to put food on the table is I find myself back doing music full time. So I am playing at parties and playing at wineries and breweries and restaurants and coffee shops and doing special engagements. And one of the things that happened to me in the last couple of weeks is this party I did last night. I ran into a few people that knew me from the town when we owned our business. I happened to be back in that town doing a party. And they proceeded to tell me stories about how they were impacted by our family and how we handled things during that time. And it was, I had to pull myself away at break time and just go in the other room and just breathe and pull myself together, because you don't always get to hear those kinds of stories. And so it was a beautiful thing. So I have found joy by people breathing life into me this week with things that happened years ago, where I get to hear the end of the story. And, so that was super fun. The other thing that's given me joy is my wife and I, because we live in a 30-foot Airstream full time, traveling across the country, playing music and seeing kids and grandkids. We are settling down just for a few months in the city where we grew up, where you grew up. And there is a new RV resort, and we are camp hosts. And so we're spending some time with family here. And I've been finding great joy in just meeting all of these people. I think just the camping community is so amazing. And I've had a ton of good conversations over the last couple of weeks.
Awesome. So you're doing music full time.
Yeah.
Which is, my recollection of you, and I was a freshman in high school and you were a senior, that, I knew this guy, John Voelz, is going to do music full time, as well as another guy named Michael Hill. And so, and I think God did that. We're both of you in ministry, both of you doing a lot of music. I always wanted to sing like Mike. That guy.
Yeah, he's got the voice of an angel.
Yeah.
Michael has been my best friend since fourth grade.
Yeah.
He's still my buddy.
Yeah. No, it's great. So what are you doing? How can people get a hold of you? That people might go, hey, I need a dude to come play at this party. So what's the best way to, what are you doing? It sounds like you'll play anywhere, the devil's backyard. Wineries and breweries, I guess you already do it. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, but so how do they get a hold of you? What do they need to do to get you to come play a gig at their event?
Yeah, that, or even if you want to talk about any of the things that we talked about today, I always am up for that kind of conversation as time allows. Probably Instagram is the best way to see what I'm doing in the area and to send me anything. And I grew up and I still am a huge Beatles fan. So my Instagram handle, as it were, is Shame on Yoko. So because, of the whole Yoko broke up the Beatles thing. I don't really believe that. She's a wonderful woman. She's done fantastic things actually for the world. And I've actually thought about changing the name, but it's just been a silly little thing that has stuck over the years. So you can find me out there as Shame on Yoko on Instagram. And yeah, we can connect. That's the best way.
Yeah, and I'll put that in the comment section and the notes so that people can start following you anyway and see the. But do you do all your graphic design?
Yeah,
there's some fun stuff out there. If you want to see this face on different bodies, this is all of that.
It's been super fun. You could also go to my website, johnvoelz.com, and you can see if you click on the concert tab, you can see all the places I'm playing. And around this area in Northern California, I think I probably have 50 gigs already on there for the next 6 months.
Good for you. Awesome.
Yeah, and then we'll move over to the Midwest and see family over there after that. But yeah.
Fun. Sounds great. Last thing. You've experienced a lot, which is great. And thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. What would be a word of encouragement to pastors or church members?
I would say weigh criticism, don't count it. This has been something that has been huge for me, and it's been encouraging. Everybody's going to have an opinion about the things that you're doing in your community. Everybody's going to have an opinion about the ideas that you have. Some of them are going to be super critical, but don't count them, weigh them. So what does that mean? Make sure you have people in your life, editors that you've invited into your life to speak into you, to listen to you, people who know where all the bodies are buried, people who know the wonderful things about you, and people who know the not so nice things. Those people you trust, surround yourself with them, and then take risks and listen to the people who love you, have your best interest at heart, have the community's best interest at heart, your church's best interest at heart. And don't count the people who talk to someone about this thing that they think that you're doing wrong. I made a decision a long time ago not to fight with invisible armies. So it's just not worth it. If you want to do amazing things, you want to stay encouraged, weigh criticism from the people who love you.
No, that's very valuable. And so if I could maybe say it this way, count the weight of the criticism by who you value and who you know love you, because that has greater weight than those that come from a friend, heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from another that you've been messing around. Okay.
Messing around, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you probably could play that.
Probably.
Well, John, thanks so much, man. I just appreciate your wisdom, your outlook, even with the years of trial and tribulation. You're still positive. You still love the Lord, and you still want people to know the Lord, and you're using the venue that God is giving you to do that very thing. And so I just pray that God would bless you and your future endeavors. I pray that people would reach out to you because of this, and together we can build the church up in love, right? As Paul says in Ephesians chapter 4. That's what we're supposed to be doing. When we're doing our part, when the church is functioning right, we're building one another in love. And so that's really the message that you've been giving. And then that takes risk, right? Jesus kind of risked it all, right? To love us. And so we're so grateful for that. So may we follow in his footsteps. Again, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks again, John. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Kirk. Good to see you, man.
Good, man. All right.